Hi, I'm Joanne Pollock with On the Art Trail with Joanne, and I'm here today with Laird Robertson of Neo Architecture in Kitchener. And Laird, it's a great pleasure to be here with you today in an absolutely stunning home, which you have so beautifully designed.
Thank you.
So Neo Architecture, when I first heard the name, you are the creative director and owner of Neo Architecture. And I was way off base when I thought about Neo, meaning neoclassicism,
Right.
to go back to that. So can you please tell us what Neo means?
Yes, Neo is derived from a study of consumers, two types of consumers. It was a 5-year study. They looked at consumers at all levels of class and wealth in life, and determined after 5 years that there are two types of consumers. One is a traditionalist, and the other is a neo. And they said neo was new economic order. The study showed that the neos valued design, they valued a personal experience. They want to have a meal in a field where the food is growing. They look for a personal experience, something that's unique, that's very different, and they're willing to spend a little bit more for that extra value. The traditionalists look for quantity and low price. So in the study, they talked about Walmart and they talked about Starbucks at the time as two sort of types, one being traditionalist and one being neo. So we thought not that architecture is a consumer product, we're obviously a consulting service product, but we were taken by the notion that there are people out there that will actually spend a little bit more on that special, unique experience. And those were the types of clients that we were looking for, clients that really wanted to go on the journey with us to design a project, looking for something that was not off the shelf, looking for something that was very unique, very personal, very custom designed for them, and enter into a collaboration to do that.
So you're known as a boutique firm. Are there other boutique firms in the area, or are you one of the first to come up with this idea?
I wouldn't say we're the first to come up with the idea. I think the notion of boutique speaks very much to the experience that one has with us as a client.
Mm-hmm.
We are a smaller firm in
Mm-hmm.
relative terms
Mm-hmm.
to other firms within the community,
Mm-hmm.
but that quality factor is something that we really, really pursue, the pursuit of sort of excellence in design, in service, that unique one-on-one contact. The clients actually meet me and work with me through the projects. Through many of the projects, I author the projects, I design them right through.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not, I'm there selling the firm and then they go work with somebody else. So part of the boutique is that they work with Laird. Right? That's the experience there. And of course we have our team in the office that we all contribute to,
Mm-hmm.
the end product. But that notion of boutique has something, to do with that custom craft, design, aesthetic, and there's a real passion for excellence in design within the firm.
Mm-hmm. Let's talk about, you've been an architect since 1985, did you tell me?
I graduated
there,
in
but you graduated
85.
in 1985, and you have worked for several firms prior to starting Neo yourself. But, when you think of the architect's architect, the first thing that jumps to mind is Corbusier. And I know that you are a Corbusier fan. And how would you describe Corbusier's style, or what are some of the distinct elements of a Corbusier style of architecture?
Corbusier is the father of modernism.
Right.
It was a change that really came about in the 30s in Europe, and it was a movement away from ornamentation towards functionality.
Mm-hmm.
He actually introduced an art style that was coined purism. at the time of Cubism. He had a different slant on it as an artist. Corb was an architect, artist, sculptor, and writer. So he developed a language that was based on the machine aesthetic. That was the origin. He looked at planes and ships and looked at the architecture of those and saw in those objects, the ship and the plane, he saw a stripped down aesthetic, that everything that was there for a specific reason, not decoration, but was there for functional reasons.
Right.
He coined the expression "a machine for living in" as the house, and it has been many, many times misinterpreted to mean a cold, machine-like house, like living in a machine. But it didn't mean that. It was part of the translation, French to English. But what it meant was that to design a home that was as purposeful as designing a machine for its function. So the home became designed in a very pure way. So purism and the Cubists at the time, the removal of ornamentation, functionality. If a column only needed to be 3 inches in diameter to hold up a building, it was only 3 inches in diameter when it was constructed. So everything was drawn down to its essence and stripped. And it became very theoretical. His sort of considered masterpiece in his young life was Villa Savoye.
Correct, yes.
And it was based on 5 rules of architecture that he established at that time. And he was writing a great deal about architecture in theory, and it became a very rational sort of expression. But that's the Corb that a lot of people know, that is more familiar, sort of like early Frank Lloyd Wright, might know Falling Water.
Yep.
Not very many people know Corbusier, but he is the grandfather of, or father of modernism, and a lot of people that are not too pleased with the sort of austereness of modernism, credit or discredit him for creating that. So, but in life, in time, he became much more romantic and much more emotional with the architecture. And his later work became very much more sculptural and not theoretical. Although he created the modulaire as a measuring, which was based on the human body. And he introduced that rational order to the plan and the section and proportions. But the overall composition was purely emotional and didn't come from a rational place.
Well, we're going to take a short break, Laird, and we're going to be back and talk more about aspects of neo-architecture, which you'll have a lot to tell us about. So we'll be right back. So we are here in a home in Waterloo Region, Laird, that you have designed very exquisitely. And there are, as you know, you look around in this home, there are, I'm sure, aspects of design which are Corbusier-esque, perhaps, because it strikes me that you are very much a purist in that form. But how would you describe your own personal architectural style or brand?
In school, introduced to Corb in second year university, and continued to study and had professors that were admirers of his work, and so it just helped me do more of exploration, of discovering his theories, his principles. I didn't visit projects at that time of his, but I certainly studied and combed through publications of the work, memorized floor plans of buildings, and really, really digested his work. And that was on a professor's recommendation. Professor's recommendation was, if you're going to ever really learn your own style, you need to study the masters until you have fully understood the principles behind their work, and then you ingest that, and what comes out of you becomes a blending of your personal vision and the principles of these architects that you happen to admire. There's many architects. It just happened that I had some strange fondness for Corb when I first saw his work. It must have just appealed to a sensibility I had at the time. So combined with that work, then you say, well, first of all, I'm not going to copy somebody. I have to find my own voice. And you start to look at what were their influences and how can those be influences of yours, like that you would interpret slightly differently. But the one thing that came the most clear to my mind, and this was what my thesis ended up being, was we aren't living in France. We're not there. We're in Ontario. We're in Canada. We have a different light. We have different materials. We have a different food. We have different traditions. We are a different people. And I believe that there was a search required to determine the regionalism, contextualism of what it means to practice architecture in Ontario. Certainly admired and still love Corb's work, but see it in its place, and am not sure in many cases whether it's transferable to Ontario, to Canada, to another country. It's of its place, and I wanted to look for of this place. So in my thesis, I studied 4 Ontario building types as a story that I started to say, I need to really understand the history of Ontario's architecture and see if we can find a language out of that. So I studied the church, we studied the barn, studied a house, but more of a home notion, and then the cottage. And they kind of represented work and play and religion and then home. What does that mean? So I did my thesis on that. And at the end of it, one of the buildings that really stuck was the barn. It was this elemental, primal, platonic gable form that sits out in the landscape as kind of almost a marker, a monument, a tomb. It had a lot of different feelings. So a very, very pure form, very abstract form in its exterior, but once you go into it, the celebration of the structure is phenomenal. And magically, the way that the light enters the inside of a barn is astonishing. So very touched by that form and that shape. So that pure gable form is what this house is about. So when I met the clients, one was Scottish, one was English, and they said, we would like a stone house. We have sort of this heritage with Scotland and England, so we'd like a stone house. We love natural light. We love looking out into landscape. We don't necessarily want to garden, but we love to look at landscape. And we have these programmatic needs, and this is our budget, and go ahead and design our home for us. So I came to this site, which was a remaining site that hadn't been sold. For a long time, the original sort of log pole pines are still, there's some on the site still, but the site was covered in those. And the site was a hillside site, sloped from one side to the other. The fascinating thing was the other requirement, they said it has to be on one level, and we really are private people. One of our, they told me a story about one of their favorite places was to go away where they would stay in a cabin that took a half an hour to get to, that was on the ocean's edge, and it was like they were the last people on Earth. And they thought that was a wonderful place to be. So they really, really were a private couple. So they buy this property that has a house like 10 feet away on either side of the property. It's not a large piece of property. So the idea was, how do you design a home that gives them that privacy, gives them the views of nature, brings in natural light, but they're not aware that their neighbors are just outside of their house. And so in that, The courtyard came out of that, but the courtyard also comes out of the agrarian architecture of a farm with the different outbuildings and the barn and the house, and they often create a court. So there was a court, then there was the gable form. Well, the gable form related to the stone cottages from England and Scotland, but were also the gable form of the barn. So started to look at it as a composition of gables to create a cloister, and they were designed as if they were found here. Like they had been built as individual buildings, and then the next layer was to link all the buildings together, the 5 gables that are of this house. And it's the link that is the modernist gesture. It's the flat roof thread that ties the 5 gables together.
Well, we're going to be right back, Laird. We have lots to talk about, so we'll be back in a moment. So we're back talking to Laird Robertson, the owner and architect of neo-architecture in Kitchener. Architects are an interesting breed, I would say. And what are some of the personality traits that are required to be a great architect, Laird?
One of the key traits is listening, and the other is passion. Those are 2. That being said, our profession, although many people see it as and refer to it as building buildings, which we don't, we design buildings, it is a technical exercise in many ways, and in other ways, it's a very artistic exercise.
Correct.
So we end up using both sides of our brain. If one professes to believe that our left brain is one and the right is the other, and we think about the right as more creative and the left is more rational, there is this sort of synergy and balance between them, very, very careful balance. And I've said many times that if an architect isn't well balanced, is either too rational, too technical, or too emotional and too design oriented, it's very difficult to run a practice and serve the full spectrum of what you have to deal with. I've joked about at times where I'm trying to answer a question on a vapor barrier in a site trailer, and then I turn and have to pick the color of the grout in a tile. And it happens just in a moment of having to be very technical and then having to be very just like visual and artistic and imagining, colors together.
What do you call guys like that?
I don't know. I call them architects.
You call them architects. I don't know. But many people strive for that, I'm sure, and never find that balance. So if you found it good.
Well, it's a profession that tests that balance.
It does. It does. You have lots of acclaim in Waterloo Region for many of the buildings that you have designed. Can you share with us some of them that you're most proud of?
Well, certainly where we are. We
Yes.
know the residents here.
Beautiful, beautiful.
Very proud of. The hospice in North
The
Waterloo
hospice, wonderful.
is currently my South Hall, I would say. It's the project that I believe I will feel as proud about as I do of this house.
Wow. And when will that come to fruition?
Well, they're starting to move in,
Oh,
but
terrific.
really it's early in the new year. It will be fully finished, and the residents will be able to move in. I've done university work, and there's a building, the School of Accounting and Finance at the University of Waterloo that
Okay.
I'm very proud of. There's a couple of office buildings in the Research and Tech Park, Accelerator Center, Initech, the AGFA building. There's a high school, St. Mary's High School is a high school I'm very proud of. Saginaw Public School, which is just up the street from here, that as a public school, very, very I'm proud of that one as well.
And what's on the horizon? I'm sure there are projects that are now on the books.
Yeah, the latest work that we're doing, there's a trend within the community of multi-residential, and especially with COVID, the office, commercial, retail market has really quieted, even institutional with schools and colleges, universities. But fortunately, there's a boom in the multi-residential market, and our firm is doing a number of multi-res projects in this
Great.
community that are starting to come out of the ground now.
Good.
And I'm very excited to see a couple of those be realized. One of them is Otis, will be facing Victoria Park Common.
Okay.
And then the sort of, it's not really a sister building, but it's called Ophelia. Our client named Otis and Ophelia after the swans at Victoria Park.
Okay.
So one is in behind the other on Queen Street. So David Street, Queen Street, Otis, Ophelia. And then there's one on right now on King Street that's on the third floor construction right now.
I have to ask you this question because education is near and dear to my heart, and I've been in education for a long time. What advice would you give to a young person that wants to go into architecture?
Every time I speak to a student who's considering it, I explain a few things about it, and I do explain this idea of the balance, that they better love building, making, painting, crafting, creating, and better
Math, physics,
and
all
then be
the tough-
very good
all the tough-
in math and physics,
Right.
which are the prerequisites.
Mm-hmm.
Strangely, math and physics are the prerequisites, whereas art was just recommended. Drafting was recommended. So a peculiar prerequisite. But the need to understand that if you think it's about construction, and that's why you're interested in architecture, is you're interested in building, or you're interested in drawing, drafting, which we kind of don't draft anymore, we CAD. But that idea that that's what your interest is, or whether you're really into the creating of form and shape and space versus interiors. So there are some people that think that the architecture is about interiors, and others that think it's about drawing, and that's a technologist profession. And then there's the architecture profession, and then there's interior design profession, and there's landscape, and there's planners, all different professions. So when we talk through and try to narrow down what they're really interested in, if I hear there's an artistic interest, there's a creating of space, they build models, then I know, okay, you understand that. The next thing I explain is that it's very, very hard to get through school. It's a rigorous profession. It is a profession.
Yes.
So there are years after that you have to work and log hours. Then you have to write a whole nother set of exams before you can call yourself an architect. It's a protected name, and you have to have this education to be able to say you're an architect. A lot of people, that gauntlet of getting through that is onerous, and you have to be tenacious and really confident is another aspect of an architect's nature, because in many ways you're selling your vision, you're selling your ideas, you're presenting your designs. You have to believe in yourself. You have to believe in what you're creating to present those with the commitment and the passion that will sometimes make people move away from their comfort level to try something else because of the will and the passion behind the presentation of the idea.
And you're building something of permanence. So whether it's a very important building in the community, or it's a home, these are hallmarks of permanent things in our world which have your name on it.
Yes.
So it's pretty important.
There's some jokes out there, like they say doctors get to bury their mistakes, and architects just cover ours up with ivy.
We can't leave this interview, Laird, with me asking you a very perhaps loaded question. But how does Laird Robertson get to be the gold medal winner in the Governor General's Royal Architectural Association of Canada? Is that a goal that you would?
I think it's a goal of every practicing architect.
I'm sure.
It is the pinnacle of the gold medal
Correct.
award. It's honored by the architecture profession to architects. So it's like the Academy Awards.
It's the Academy
You know,
Award.
it is the one that we pursue. But it isn't something that you simply just pursue. It happens more than you pursue it. It is through a combination of the stars aligning.
Yep.
A client who has the vision and the passion to go somewhere very special, the talent of the individual to be able to take that client and that project to that level. And sometimes, no matter how hard you try to do the perfect building, you don't do it when you really, really think you're going to. And other times, it comes very naturally. So not every project comes as easily. Not every project is as successful. But I think all you can hope is that you just continue to try and be passionate, committed, and maybe you'll get recognized for that.
Well, on that note, I think we have to say thank you very much for an incredibly interesting interview today.
Thank you.
And I certainly wish you the best. It's been a real pleasure to get to know you and to understand the mind of an architect. So thank you, Laird.
Thank you.
And I wish you the best.